The winds of the vast Mongolian steppes once carried the thunderous charge of Genghis Khan's armies. Unstoppable, untamed, and unrivaled, these warriors, feared and revered, conquered vast lands, from the heart of Asia to the gates of Europe. But what if I told you that within a single generation, these same warriors would lay down their swords for the Quran? This is the story of how the sons of the greatest conqueror the world has ever known. Men who had the power to shape nations chose a path that would transform the Mongol Empire forever. They were not just heirs to an empire, but architects of a new spiritual conquest. How did these brutal warriors, born into a life of battle and blood, find themselves embracing the peaceful teachings of Islam? In this documentary, we journey back to the 13th century, a time when the world was on the brink of change, where power met faith, and where the children of Genghis Khan would forge a new legacy. Prepare to uncover the untold story of how the fiercest empire in history was won over by a faith that promised peace in a world of chaos. Don't just watch history, experience it. Subscribe now to dive into exclusive stories and uncover the powerful truths behind the world's most epic transformations. Be the first to explore the untold and the extraordinary. Temujin came into this world in 1162 as a member of one of the several Mongolian tribes in the Far East. Similar to the Turks, they traversed the Great Steppe on horseback, subsisting on grass from the expansive deserts that were there. Temujin would rise to the position of clan chief in due time, and, by marriage, alliances and conflict, started to bring the many Mongol tribes together under one banner. And in 1206, after he had vanquished all of his enemies, a ritual was performed and he was bestowed the title of Universal Ruler, or Genghis Khan in Mongolian. His focus quickly shifted to the outside world and he proceeded to extend his dominion in all directions. To begin, he struck at the Chinese Empire, a country that had, for 1,000 years, erected a network of barriers to ward off these feuding tribes. Genghis also dispatched forces over Central Asia's level plains, where they conquered neighboring steppe nomads and eventually reached the Muslim Khwarezmian Empire. Using siege equipment and engineers brought over from China, the Mongols began assaulting the principal Muslim strongholds in Central Asia, seizing each one and in some cases murdering every man, woman and kid they could locate. The Abbasid Caliphate was now within reach of the Mongols. When Genghis Khan passed away in 1227, the Mongol conquest of Muslim nations came to a short standstill. And during the next few decades, a series of new Mongol Khans would follow in his footsteps. Till in 1251, Monkey Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, was chosen the fourth great Khan of the Mongol Empire. Monkey then dispatched his brother Hulaku with an army to invade and destroy the remaining Muslim areas. In 1258, the Mongol army landed at the gates of Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate and the center of the scientific golden age of Islam, and laid it under siege. The siege only lasted 13 days, and when the Mongol horde eventually invaded the city, a slaughter followed. For one entire week, Mongol warriors ravaged the city, slaughtering its men, women and children. Even the Caliph himself was wrapped up in a robe and trampled to death by their horses. The Mongols later claimed that they had slain 2 million people in the genocide. Libraries and hospitals and palaces and mosques were all destroyed, and even the Grand Library of Baghdad, the house of learning, was burnt to the ground. It was stated that so many books were tossed into the Tigris River that they created a bridge that could sustain a man on horseback, and that the ink of those books made the river black. With Baghdad now in ruins, the Abbasid Caliph dead, it marked the end of the scientific golden era of Islam, and the Abbasid Caliphate ceased to exist. There was now just one city remaining that could generate an army to safeguard the remainder of the Muslim Ummah from being wiped out. Cairo was the final stand of the Muslims. In Egypt, the two most powerful monarchs were Qutb and Baybars. Both Muslims came from Central Asia, where they had been taken by the Mongols and sold as slaves, and their relatives have been slaughtered in front of them. Eventually, they found themselves back in the Muslim world where, unlike any other culture in existence, it was frequently slaves that controlled. At the death of his lord Aybak, the slave sultan of Egypt, Qutb assumed his position while Baybars became a general under his command. These two men, having closely experienced the fury of the Mongol hordes, felt the weight of the world on their shoulders. They were the barricade that stood between the Mongol army and the innocent lives of the Muslim men, women and children who waited and prayed for the triumph of Allah to be determined. And therefore they began their march towards Syria in order to face that Mongol force. But all of a sudden, as they were marching, Hulagu heard news that the great Khan had died, and now Hulagu was compelled to travel back to Mongolia to attend the election of a new Khan. Now was the moment to attack, and in 1260 Kutus and Baibars managed to capture the Mongols at Enjalut, and the war started. Baibars led a small force into combat, while the main army waited behind with Kutus. And when the Mongols assaulted Baibars' troops, he faked a retreat, leading the Mongols into a trap. Kutus then emerged with his main force, considerably greater than the Mongol army, and finally he managed to encircle them and kill their leader. To the Mongols it was evident that they had lost, and those that had yet to fall fled from the battlefield, defeated. At Ain Jalut, the location where David was reputed to have defeated Goliath, the Mamluks had now conquered the Mongols, and the Muslims had been rescued. But the Mongol Empire nonetheless remained as huge as ever, and the Muslims anticipated a second onslaught to arrive at any time. But what many people didn't realize at the time was that there was another army of Muslim soldiers starting to conduct their own battle against the Mongols. But this time, the leaders of that Muslim army were the Mongol Khans themselves. You see, Genghis Khan had 4 sons to his first marriage: Jochi, Chagatai, Ogedei, and Torui. And as the Mongol Empire developed, it was divided into 4 primary districts, each ruled by the descendants of one of these 4 sons. The Golden Horde in the north was administered by the sons of Jochi, while the Ilkhanate was assigned to the sons of Torui. The Chagatai Khanate was administered by the sons of Chagatai, while Ogedei and his son Gayuk reigned above them all as the heirs of Genghis Khan from the heartland of Mongolian China. Eventually Gayuk died in 1248, and Tolui's son Monke succeeded to gain control of Mongolia with the support of Jochi's sons, eliminating the house of Ogedei from the throne. Soon after, 2 of the sons of Jochi that had helped Monke seize the kingdom converted to Islam in 1252. And so when Mankai and his brother Hulaku devastated Baghdad in 1258, they were outraged. By that time Berk was in charge of the Golden Horde, and he linked himself with the Mamluks and joined them in their strive to safeguard the Muslim homeland. And after Mankai died in 1259, and the Mamluks crushed Hulaku's army in 1260, Berk took advantage of the confusion and began his own war. Hulaku returned to the Middle East in 1262 after establishing his own brother on the throne and started another campaign of invasions on the Muslim territories. Berke then released his forces under the command of 2 Muslim Mongol generals, assaulting Hulaku and dragging his army north away from the Mamluks and into the Caucasus highlands. At the same time, a civil war broke out between Kublai Khan and the last of Tului's sons, Arif Buyuk, for the throne. Arif Buyuk then established an alliance with Berke, while Kublai continued to back Hulaku. The Mongol Empire was now irrevocably broken, and never again would the Mongols pose a danger to the Muslims, but rather, in a twist of fate, 3 of those 4 Mongol Khanates would be absorbed by the Muslim world, and the Mongols of those regions would become Muslim themselves. The Golden Horde in the north had already begun their conversion to Islam under the authority of Berke Khan, and this was subsequently completed during the tenure of Uzbek Khan in the early 1300s. The Ilkhanate, which had been controlled by Hulagu, was inherited by his son Tekedur in 1282, who finally accepted Islam and became the first Muslim emperor of the Ilkhanate. But many among the ruling elite did not appreciate this, and he was killed by his own nephew in 1284. However, the Mongols were a governing minority in a region of Muses, and soon many within the ruling elite began to convert to Islam. Even Agon's sons Ghazan and Evjetog eventually converted to Islam, and when they assumed leadership of the Ilkhanate, Islam became the state religion in the region once more. And lastly, the Chagatai Khanate was the last of the 3 to accept Islam, converting in 2 consecutive periods. In 1252, Mubarak Shah became the first Chagatai emperor to convert to Islam, and the Muslims stayed in control until 1309, when a Tenggris Khan ascended the throne. For the following 4 decades, the Khanate alternated hands between the Muslim and pagan monarchs until the 1340s, when the Khanate was split in 2, with the west being held by the Muslims and the east by the pagans. But even those Mongols in the east would eventually adopt Islam. In 1347, Tughluq Timur was elected Khan of Mughalistan, the new name for the eastern Chagatai Khanate. He was a shamanist who detested the Muslims, thinking them as less than human. But that all changed when one day a Muslim scholar from Persia was visiting through their land, and he accidentally trespassed on Tughlaq's exclusive hunting grounds. As the narrative goes, when Tughlaq came upon him, he wanted to know why he was there. Knowing that he may be executed for such a violation, the scholar merely replied that he didn't realize that this was private property, and that it was an accident. When Tughlaq heard him, he learned that the scholar was from Persia and claimed the dog was worth more than a Persian. The professor then shockingly concurred, adding, "Yes, if we had not the proper religion, we should truly be worse than dogs." Surprised by this explanation, Tughlaq instantly became intrigued about the genuine faith. Realizing he understood very little about Islam, he began asking inquiries about the beliefs of the Muslims. Not long after, Tughlaq adopted Islam, and all of his governors quickly joined him. And when he subsequently officially revealed his conversion, it was estimated that 160,000 of his people shaved their heads and converted to Islam. Both sides of the Chagatai Kai Khanate have now adopted Islam, becoming the third Khanate to do so. The Mongols, who had formerly been the greatest adversaries of the Muslims and had driven the Muslim Ummah to the point of annihilation, had now turned Muslim themselves. All that remained was the Yuan dynasty in China, and even they too at one point had a single Muslim Khan themselves.